She had 14 children with her own brother, the purest woman with Kentucky forests. What would you do if you found out that your family hides secrets so deep that they could shake the foundations of society itself? Appalachian mountains keep stories that rarely reach our ears, lost between isolated valleys and communities that live on the fringes of time. Today, I will reveal to you a case that remained buried in the shadows for almost 2 centuries. Martha Sullivan was not just a woman in the countryside. She carried in her womb the weight of a family tradition that challenged the laws of nature and society. What you will discover in the next few minutes may forever change your vision on the limits of family loyalty and the price paid by those who are born fruits of pure blood. If you enjoy historical investigations that reveal the darkest truths of the human condition, be sure to subscribe to the channel right now. Get ready to know a story that is rarely told outside the closer academic circles. A narrative that witnesses such as isolation and distorted beliefs can create generations marked by a devastating genetic legacy. Between the deep valleys and the green hills of Kentucky, where the sun rarely penetrates through the dense treearts, there is only stacked stones and rotting boards left. These are the silent traces of the Sullivan property, founded in 1798, a place that the inhabitants of the region avoid to this day. The wind that blows between the old oaks seems to carry whispers, as if the earth still kept memory of the children who were born there with deformed faces and incomplete minds. When we look at these ruins, we need to understand that we do not only contemplate remains of a house. We are facing the physical testimony of a terrible philosophy, the belief that the purity of family blood needed to be preserved at any cost. The farming, far from the thunder that often punished these mountains, accompanied the muffled cry of babies born with extra fingers and malformed hearts, while the family patriarch Ebenezer Sullivan proudly proclaimed, "Our blood will remain pure like gold without outside of the outsiders." The dark clouds accumulate again on the ruins as an omen of what is coming in this story. If you want to follow more cases like this, which move with all society and reveal hidden truths, subscribe to the channel so as not to lose any investigation. The Sullivan property stretched for approximately 320 acres of rugged land in the mountains of Harlan County, Kentucky. A 2-story wooden house and 8 rooms rose in the center, surrounded by barns, stables, and smaller huts for hired workers. The family kept rigid internal hierarchy. Ebenezer at the top, followed by their men, then women born Sullivan, and lastly temporary workers who never remained more than 1 season. The day began at 4 a.m. with the sound of the iron bell that echoed through the valley, calling everyone to their functions. Women spent 16 hours a day preparing food, weaving clothes, and taking care of the younger ones, while men worked in hunting, agriculture, and occasional trade with distant villages. Control was exercised by constant surveillance. Strategically positioned windows allowed Enya to observe each movement on the property. The family chapel, built with dark oak trunks, housed not only prayers, but meetings where weddings between cousins and close relatives were decided. The rock of the floorboards announced the arrival of the patriarch when everyone was absolutely silent. When snow covered the mountains and completely isolated the property for months, births occurred in the basement of the main house, away from external looks. And it was during the particularly severe winter of 1823 that Martha Sullivan came into the world with penetrating blue eyes that seemed to contain a knowledge far beyond his age. That child who unknowingly carried the future of family lineage in his womb. Martha Sullivan grew up showing extraordinary skills that distinguished her among family members. At the age of 9, he already knew the medicinal properties of 73 different plants that grew in surrounding forests. His ability to memorize biblical texts impressed even the itinerant pastor who visited the region annually. While the other girls in the family remained confined to the limits of the property, Martha received special permission from her father to accompany men on occasional commercial trips to the village of Cumberland, 12 miles away. In these rare forays into the outside world, she carefully observed social interactions, absorbing information about medicine, CIO, and news from the world, never revealing details about his own family. In the Sullivan community, Martha held a privileged position. She was the only woman authorized to attend family meetings where important issues were discussed. The inhabitants of the surrounding area sought their healing skills, allowing it to cross the invisible border between Sullivan isolation and the rest of society. The girl has the gift of the healing hands and the language that does not speak, the places said, trusting her while they remained fearful of the rest of the family. During full moon nights, Martha could be seen by gathering specific herbs that only flourish in this light, moving as a shadow between the trees, carrying knowledge passed by generations of women. Sullivan. The paradox resided precisely in this. The more valuable it became to the external community, the more indispensable it became for the family's internal plans, especially for his brother Jeremiah, only 2 years older, who watched her with growing interest as they both matured. Leave in the comments, never give up the truth if you believe justice must reach all the oppressed. The horrors on the Sullivan property manifested themselves gradually as shadows that lengthen into dusk. First it was the whispers about the birth of cousin Robert in 1825 with 6 fingers on each hand and unable to issue sounds and primitive grunts kept in the attic and fed through a hatch. Then came the cousin Elizabeth, born in 1827 of the marriage between uncle and niece, whose skin had bluish spots and eyes so away that it seemed impossible to focus both simultaneously on the same object. In 1829, Frederick, son of first-degree cousins, was born, who at the age of 3 could not still firm his head alone, dying during a particularly violent seizure before he was 5 years old. With each problematic birth, Martha observed the reaction of adults, denial, rationalization, and finally, supernatural or religious explanations that never questioned the practice of consanguineous marriages. When the cousin's daughter Henry and Victoria was born without eyes in 1831, Martha witnessed the patriarch Ebenezer to declare, "It's a divine trial, not a signal to change our ways." Martha's inner transformation began quietly at that moment, like water that slowly erodes the stone. Her face remained impassive as she helped the midwife, but something fundamental changed inside her. In his diary, he found decades later, he wrote with trembled lyrics, "I saw the face without an innocent eye today, and realized that it was not God who created this incomplete creature, but the choices of men who consider themselves above the laws of nature." Martha's world definitely collapsed on April 16, 1834, when her youngest sister of only 9, Sarah, was declared ready for the family pact. Sarah, a crystal laugh girl and golden hair, was the only person Martha openly showed affection. The two shared a small room under the roof of the main house, where Martha secretly taught her sister to read and write, contrary to the family rules that considered female education unnecessary beyond basic domestic knowledge. That spring morning, Sarah was taken to the family chapel, where the patriarch announced his future marriage to his 42-year-old cousin, Herbert Sullivan, known for his cruelty to animals and violent temperament. When Martha protested during the ceremony, she was forced to witness her sister's punishment, forcibly cut hair, followed by 3 days of confinement in the granary without proper water. On the 3rd day, when they finally allowed Martha to bring water to Sarah, she found her sister burning in fever, raving black angels with iron claws. Martha spent 72 uninterrupted hours applying cold compresses and preparing medicinal infusions, holding the warm small hand between her own. At dawn on the 4th day, he felt Sarah's fingers relax between her. With no tears or external mourning manifestations, Martha washed her sister's body with water from wild roses, wrapped him in white linen that was fabric for her own leet, and placed a small cloth doll, the last secret gift for Sarah, next to her body before the burial. That night, alone in the star of the stars, Martha took a silent oath in the face of the simple tomb. For every tear not shed, for every suffocated scream, there will be a reckoning. The system that supported the Sullivan property was composed of mutually reinforced authority. In the center, Ebenezer Sullivan, then 63, ruled with a firm hand and religious rhetoric, citing distorted biblical passages to justify isolation and internal marriages. Your firstborn, Jeremy R.25, 25 performing physical punishment, had developed particular methods of discipline without leaving visible marks using wet towels to delge transgressors. Uncle Thaddeus Ebene's younger brother supervised the financial aspects, making semester trips to sell property products and buy supplies, occasionally bringing desperate women from villages distant to partially renew family blood. Reverend Blackwood, not seamed but complicit for convenience, visited the property quarterly to officialize unions and baptisms, receiving generous compensation for silence. The growing tension reached irreversible point during the celebration of Ebene's 65th anniversary in October 1836. In the presence of the entire gathered family, the patriarch announced, "To ensure the continuity of our purest lineage, I declare that Martha and Jeremiah will unite their lives and blood on the next full moon." Martha, then 19, witnessed her brother's face smile as her relatives applauded the decision. That same night, he listened behind the door to the detailed plan Ebenezer revealed to Jeremiah. "You will produce the next generation of Sullivan leaders. Your children born of the purest blood of our lineage will be created under my direct supervision to continue our tradition when I leave." Martha understood then that she had reached the point without return. It was not just her future that was at stake, but generations for birth. On November 7, 1836, Martha was subjected to the purification ritual that preceded all Sullivan marriages. Naked and bathed in herbs with 3 older women in the family, he remained silent as they sang old songs brought from the British Isles. Her long brown hair was braided with white ribbons symbolizing purity, while Aunt Agnes whispered instructions on her marital duties, with details that made her stomach turn. Dressed in a white nightgown made especially for the occasion, it was led to the center of the family circle where Ebenezer and Jeremiah were waiting. The patriarch held his right hand and his son on the left, lifting them above his head as he proclaimed, "This blood belongs only to the Sullivan, will remain among the Sullivan and generate new Sullivan." The ceremony was interrupted when Martha fainted suddenly, falling hard against the wooden floor. The family doctor, Dr. Thompson, an alcoholic man whose license to practice medicine had been revoked years earlier, stated that it was only feminine nervousness and recommended rest until wedding day. During his supposed recovery, Martha was kept under constant surveillance in the room she once shared with Sarah. Through the narrow window, she watched the preparations for her wedding, the decoration of the chapel with branches of pinheiro, the construction of the new cabin where she would live with Jeremiah, the relatives who arrived from neighboring properties. His previously expressive and living face has become an impassive mask. "The girl lost her soul," commented one of the aunts. "It's the price of purity," replied another. On the night of November 11, 1836, Martha executed the plan that had been silently elaborating since the death of Sarah. Using knowledge acquired during years of observation and secret study, a combination of herbs that induced deep sleepless sleep has mingled with the celebration. While the Sullivan drank and celebrated the union that would happen the next day, Martha remained sober, watching the heavy eyes and the increasingly slow movements of the guests. When the last one fell into deep sleep, including the designated guards to watch it, each element of the meticulously structured plan put into action. First, it recovered from the hiding place under the loose floorboard, a small bag containing gold coins that had collected over the years, secretly selling medicinal herbs to surrounding inhabitants. He then put on previously prepared men's clothes, cutting the long hair with the knife he kept sharp under the mattress. He gathered a group of 5 children, all born with deformities resulting from consanguineous unions, and kept hidden in various corners of the property. With silent and accurate movements, he led the children out of the main house to the stable, where 2 horses were already sealed. The date chosen was not accidental. He had purposely coincided with the new moon, ensuring maximum darkness for the escape. The countdown that had mentally had for months had finally reached 0. "Today we were born again," whispered to the frightened children as he helped them ride. On the Sullivan property, marriage preparations reached its peak. Oil flashlights illuminated the path of the main house to the chapel, where Reverend Blackwood, already drunk, rehearsed the words of the ceremony. In the fourth, destined for the bride, 3 Sullivan aunts arranged the white dress over the empty bed, arguing which of them would have the honor of placing the traditional veil of the family. In the kitchen, a whole pig was slowly baked in the fire, while women prepared breads and candy for the feast that would extend for 2 days, according to tradition. At the same time, miles away, Martha Sullivan performed each phase of the plan with watchmate accuracy. In the shadows of the dense forest, he applied dark dyes to the children's faces and his own camouflage that had prepared days before using green nuts and coal. 2 of the little ones, unable to ride alone due to limb deformities, were tied with leather straps to their body. The oldest of the 5, a 12-year-old boy, he had never developed speech articulated but understood instructions, firmly held the residential of the second horse, where the other 2 children balancing. The distant sound of music and laughter was gradually replaced by the noise of the hooves against the soft forest soil and the occasional pio of owls. When the first light of the dawn began to dye the horizon, the small group had reached the first stage of the plan. The abandoned cabin of a hunter 15 miles from Sullivan property where Martha had secretly stocked supplies for months. The combined signal, 3 short whistles, was given to confirm that they had reached the first safe point. In the early hours of November 12, 1836, Martha Sullivan executed his plan in meticulously timed steps. First phase infiltration in the patriarch's quarters where family documents were kept with silent movements learned by observing hunters recovered birth certificates and the family record book that documenting the practice of consanguineous marriages for generations. Second phase strategic isolation, cutting the alarm bell strings and removing the wheels from the carts to make it difficult. Third phase, liberation of hidden children. 5 small ones kept in several secret property compartments due to their visible deformities. For each adult who had participated directly in the cruelties, Martha left a specific mark. For Uncle, who had flogged Sarah, a strand of her sister's golden hair over the pillow, for Cousin Herbert intended to marry Sarah, a children's drawing that the girl had made weeks before she died. Upon finding Jeremiah in deep sleep, he leaned over him and whispered in his ear, "Sullivan blood ends here." In the Patriarch Ebene's room, he left the book of records on the page that documenting the birth and premature death of 23 children in the last 15 years, all with congenital deformities, with a single sentence written on the margins. It was not God who created these monsters. When the fire began to consume the barn where Sarah had been punished to death, Martha was already driving the 5 children through the forest trail, leaving behind only silence. The exodus led by Martha followed a precise script. First, the stop at the hunter's cabin, where they exchanged the horses marked with the Sullivan symbol for less identifiable mules. Then divided into 2 groups for less visibility. They followed by secondary trails avoiding main roads where escape news would certainly circulate. Martha had arranged in advance a meeting with Rebecca Thornton, a midwife and herbalist who lived in the fringes of society and sympathized with her cause after witnessing the results of consanguineous marriages in Sullivan children who were occasionally brought to treatments. In Rebecca's simple house, Martha organized a makeshift ritual. She cut a lock of hair from each child, burned them along with the wedding dress that had secretly removed from the main house, mixing the ashes with soil, and planting a youthful oak in this soil symbolically enriched. "This tree will mark the end of one cycle and the beginning of the other," explained to the children who watched with wide eyes. The plan included calculated resistances. Martha knew that some of the children, conditioned to the oppressive environment, would fear the unknown outside world. For the 6-year-old girl who refused to leave the hiding place at Rebecca's house, she softly sang old lays until she fell asleep in her arms. For the older boy who tried to flee back to the security of the Sullivan property, he offered no orders but choose. The first true choice that any Sullivan had ever received. When they finally left, they formed a small column, Martha ahead, each child carrying only a significant personal object, and Rebecca closing the rear. In the distance, the smoke is still visible, rising like a grey column against the blue sky of November, marking the place where generations of Sullivans had perpetuated their cycle of isolation and genetic degeneration. News about events on the Sullivan property spread as a fire in Campo Seco. Harland County Sheriff, initially reluctant to investigate the internal affairs of the isolated family, was forced to act when flames consumed a significant part of the property. His official report preserved in the county archives describes with bureaucratic language what he found. Structures damaged by seemingly deliberate fire, several individuals in a comatose state due to the ingestion of unknown substance. Disappearance of an adult woman MS and 5 smaller. The correspondence between local and state authorities reveals increasing alarm. Case Sullivan represents potential threat to social and moral order. Maximum discretion is recommended. In December 1836, records indicate that 3 other isolated properties in the Appalachian Mountains, all with a history of marriages between close relatives, suffered similar events. Children with missing deformities, compromising family documents mysteriously exposed to the community. In February 1837, the governor of Kentucky received a confidential report mentioning the emergence of a Sullivan method, a term used to describe the systematic release of children born of consanguineous unions and exposure of family records. The press of the time, limited by social conventions, referred only indirectly to events mentioning disturbances in isolated communities and renewed interest of the authorities in marriage practices in the mountainous regions. Among the families who kept similar traditions, however, panic was palpable. Private documents reveal frantic correspondence. "We must disperse children immediately." In contrast, between marginalized communities and abolitionist groups, hopeful whispers circulated on the woman who frees the forgotten. The state's response to Martha's escape and the subsequent wave of liberation was quick and severe. In March 1837, Governor James Clark secretly authorized the formation of a special force composed of 6 experienced rangers led by Captain William Harrington, a veteran of indigenous wars known for his relentless efficiency. Using tracking techniques improved during years of persecution of fugitive slaves, they followed the group's trail through 5 counties. The progressive siege strategy gradually reduced the territory available for hiding place while agents infiltrated in marginal communities offered information for information. The first capture occurred in April 1837. 2 of the children found in a Shaker community that had welcomed them without questioning their origins. In June, the siege was squeezed when a walking merchant, tempted by the substantial reward, revealed that he had transported a young woman with short hair accompanied by 3 deformed children through the Ohio River. The final betrayal came from an unexpected source. Reverend Michaels, who had initially offered a sanctuary to the group in his small rural church, handed over his location after pressure from the authorities, who threatened to investigate their own questionable financial practices. The decisive confrontation took place on August 17, 1837 in an isolated cabin near Cincinnati. Unofficial reports describe as Martha, realizing that they were surrounded, organized the escape of the remaining 3 children through a previously prepared tunnel, while she remained to delay the persecutors. Witnesses say that when the Rangers broke into the door, they found it calmly sitting at the table with the Sullivan documents organized in front of them and a small bottle of poison already empty in their hands. His last words recorded by Captain Harrington in his personal diary, "Sullivan blood now runs free around the world. You will never find them all." In the decades following the death of Martha Sullivan, his history gradually became a family scandal into regional legend. In the isolated communities of the Appalachians, a body of oral traditions around his figure developed. Hunters swore to see a woman with short hair guiding children through the forest on new moon nights. Midwinds discreetly offered protection to newborns with deformities, citing the math away as a justification. Families that kept practices of consanguineous marriages reported night visits of a female presence that left small cloth dolls similar to that Martha had put in Sarah's coffin as a silent warning. Objects associated with their history have acquired almost mythical status. The Sullivan family records book Para logically burned. He went through several hands before he was donated anonymously to Cuckes Historical Society in 1867, where he remains today as an important document on matrimonial practices of the period. In isolated rural communities, folkloric songs have preserved their memory through coded verses. The midnight lady takes the small marked when the moon hides and the watchmen sleep. From 1870, there is a significant decline in marriages between close relatives in the mountainous regions, a phenomenon that academic historians attribute to the growing social and economic integration. While local traditions are credited with the Sullivan effect, discreet pilgrimages to Martha's alleged burial site, a small unidentified mound near the Ohio-Kentucky border, became an annual tradition between families with a history of congenital deficiencies. In impressive contrast to official records that minimized their existence, popular memory turned Martha Sullivan into a lasting symbol of resistance against practices that sacrificed innocent lives on the altar of distorted traditions. In certain isolated communities of the Appalachians, even today, when a child with extra fingers or other signs of consanguinity is born, the elders whisper, "This child has the touch of Martha." If you watched so far, it is because you care about these stories that marked our country forever. Leave a comment saying, "I watched here so that I can meet you and know who really cares about the search for historical truth." Like this video if the story of Martha Sullivan touched her heart. Share so that Martha Sullivan's memory is never forgotten.